Do you ever just feel like, pulled in a million directions, like your attention is constantly under attack and there's just never enough time? It's a feeling I think we all know. And when that pressure hits, our first thought is usually boundaries. We need better boundaries. But what if the way we normally think about boundaries, like drawing lines, putting up walls, what if that's actually missing something crucial? Today, we're doing a deep dive to really rethink boundaries, moving from seeing them as just protective to seeing them as enabling presence. Our guide is Tony Zampella. He's the founder of Pavana Learning Group, who are experts in contemplative learning for inner wisdom. He's a wisdom coach, a guide, leadership consultant. His work really digs into ontological inquiry, integral meta theory, Buddhist psychology, that kind of thing, all aimed at sustaining contemplative practice.
That's right. And our mission today really is to step away from seeing boundaries as just defensive shields. We want to explore a completely different perspective, seeing them as generative, shifting the focus from simple protection towards fostering authentic presence and, importantly, commitment to what really matters to you.
Yeah, generative. That's an interesting word there. Because you're right, the whole topic of boundaries, it's exploded in coaching, management, leadership circles over the past, 10 years?
Oh, absolutely.
And it makes sense we're all swimming in distractions. But Zampella points out that these conversations usually focus on, like, cordoning off or separating,
It's often framed as keeping things out, protecting yourself from something or someone.
rather than connecting or creating something new.
Exactly. There's often this subtle undertone of defense. And what's interesting is that Zampella, even in some earlier work, hinted at something more. He suggested boundaries are actually vital for creating the space needed to become whole, to cultivate that inner wisdom. So it's not just what you block, but what you make room for.
Okay, so this is where it gets really fascinating, I think. Zampella lays out this core distinction. He calls it ontological. He suggests grounding boundaries not in protection, but in presence. Not defense, but devotion. Devotion to what matters most.
That's the absolute heart of it. And to really get it, we need to differentiate between two lenses, the psychological and the ontological. Psychology, generally speaking, deals with the mind, emotions, behavior.
Yeah.
So a psychological boundary is often about protecting your internal state, right? Managing feelings, setting emotional limits, maybe avoiding getting tangled up.
Okay, that sounds familiar, like saying no to protect your energy.
Precisely.
Yeah.
But ontology,
Yeah.
that's the study of being. It's about how we exist, how we show up in the world, what are we actually committed to, how do we bring meaning into reality through our choices, our presence. And Zampella argues most of the usual talk about boundaries comes from that psychological frame, self-protection. Almost like we see ourselves as this fragile container that needs defending.
A fragile container.
Yeah, I can see how that language implies needing walls. So how are these ontological boundaries different then? You said generative.
Yes, generative. That's the key difference, Zampella highlights. They aren't primarily about keeping others or unwanted things out. Instead, they're about actively making room for something authentic to emerge within you, or even between you and others.
Making room.
From this ontological view, boundaries aren't walls. He calls them distinctions in being. They don't come from a place of fear or past trauma necessarily. They arise from a clarity of commitment and possibility. It's less a reaction, more what he calls an enactment of integrity.
Enactment of integrity. I like that phrase. It sounds much more active, more intentional than just drawing a line in the sand. What does he mean by enactment exactly?
Well, enactment means you're actively living it out, bringing it into being through your choices and actions. It's not just an idea in your head. He gives this great example. Imagine you're feeling overwhelmed in a conversation. Instead of just shutting down or leaving abruptly.
Which would be the protective move.
Right.
Right. Instead, you might say something like, look, I really value this conversation and I want to stay engaged, but I just need a little space to process this before I respond properly.
Ah, okay.
See, that's not avoidance. It's a conscious act. You're honoring the relationship and your own capacity to remain present and authentic within it. You're showing up, even in your need for space.
That feels different. More relational.
It is. And he uses another analogy. Think about the silence in a contemplative retreat.
Okay.
Psychologically, you could see it as withdrawal, right? Everyone just opting out of talking.
Yeah.
But ontologically, Zampella says it's a constitutive agreement. It's a shared understanding, a boundary that creates the very conditions for stillness, for clarity, for a deeper presence and truth to emerge.
So the silence isn't just the absence of noise, it's actively creating a specific kind of space.
Exactly. It makes a new horizon of possibility available. It allows for a different way of being together.
A constitutive agreement
Yeah.
that implies it's not just my boundary, but something we're creating together. Am I getting that right?
You are spot on. And that leads to another really crucial point Zampella makes. Psychological boundaries often feel very personal, right? My limits for my needs.
Mm.
But ontological boundaries, he argues, are better understood as shared agreements.
Hmm.
They might be explicit or sometimes they're implicit, but they are fundamentally intersubjective. They exist between us.
Intersubjective,
Yeah.
meaning in the shared space.
Precisely. And he has this really powerful quote. If we're to move forward together, this is the space where I can show up aligned with what I stand for. Notice the shift. It's not this is where I stop you. It's this is the space where I can be authentically me with you. It moves from protection to coherence.
Coherence, aligning with what you stand for.
Yeah. The boundary becomes a relational condition. It's the structure that allows for clarity and integrity in how you engage with others, not just how you keep them away.
That resonates. I think we've all felt boundaries that just felt like walls being slammed down. Zampella gives this detailed example of Elena, a leadership consultant. She was drowning in quick chat requests, totally scattered.
It's a familiar story for many, I imagine.
Totally. So her first move was classic psychological boundary setting, time blocking. She blocked off chunks of her calendar.
The standard approach. Did it work?
Not really. She still felt fragmented, rushed. Her breakthrough, Zampella explains, came when she realized the core issue wasn't just time, it was the lack of spaciousness.
A spaciousness, that's different.
Right. She needed that mental room to think deeply, to bring her best self to her clients. So her calendar needed to protect that spaciousness. She started saying things like, my availability might seem a bit more limited now, and that reflects the space I need to show up with the depth this work requires. When we do meet, I want to be fully present with you.
Wow, that's quite a reframing. And that shift, Zampella says, turned her calendar from just a logistical tool, scheduling slots, into a commitment structure.
A commitment structure.
Yeah. Her boundary wasn't just about her personal limits anymore. It became a shared agreement, implicitly at least, to protect the space where truth and insight could emerge.
For both of them.
Exactly. It was about creating the conditions for real presence and value, not just drawing a line. It's a fantastic example of these distinctions in being, in action.
Elena's story really lands, that feeling of time blocking yourself into exhaustion, but still feeling scattered.
Yeah. Yeah, I think many of us can relate.
The missing piece wasn't more blocks, but that qualitative spaciousness.
Precisely. And this highlights another key aspect Zampella emphasizes. Ontological boundaries aren't fixed walls. They're dynamic. They're lived distinctions that we enact moment by moment.
Lived distinctions,
Yeah.
meaning they require ongoing attention.
Yes, they require presence, discernment, and sometimes real courage. Because they're tied to our deepest commitments, they need to be responsive. But crucially, we adjust them not out of reactivity like lashing out when we feel pushed, but out of what Zampella calls fidelity to what matters most.
Fidelity to what matters most. That really captures it. Staying true to your core values, even when it's difficult. How does Zampella show this responsiveness playing out?
He shares an example of a man named Marcus and his father. After Marcus went on a meditation retreat, he realized certain political topics inevitably led to these reactive, draining debates with his dad.
Oh boy. A common family dynamic.
Right, so the typical boundary might be to just avoid those topics, or maybe even avoid his dad around certain times.
The psychological protection move again?
Exactly. But Marcus did something different. He decided he wanted to connect with his father, but needed to shape the space of their interaction differently. So before dinner one evening, he gently said something like, "Dad, I'd love for us to connect tonight without slipping into debate mode. I'm trying to learn how to connect and listen with more curiosity rather than focusing on proving a point."
That took courage, I bet.
For sure. But notice he wasn't trying to control his father's behavior or tell him what he could or couldn't say. That would be the old model. Instead, Zampella says he was naming the conditions under which he could remain connected, authentically. It was an invitation.
An invitation to a different kind of conversation.
Yes. An act of co-creation aimed at relational integrity, creating a space for presence, not just avoiding conflict.
This really turns our usual idea of strength on its head, doesn't it? We often think strength is about being tough, defending yourself, maybe withholding.
Putting up that strong front.
But Zampella seems to suggest something else entirely with this ontological view.
He absolutely does. From his perspective, the real strength here is actually found in courage. It takes profound strength to stand in truth, or maybe even to reveal oneself authentically, by shaping the space the conditions where truth can be spoken, where genuine presence can be maintained, where commitment can be lived out.
So strength isn't hardness, it's integrity, presence.
You could say that it's a subtler but maybe more powerful kind of strength.
Right.
He has this beautiful description of these boundaries, not as fences keeping things out, as fields of clarity. These spaces, these distinctions, they form what he calls the silent architecture of freedom.
Fields of clarity. I really like that image. The silent architecture of freedom.
Wow. Okay, so this is profound, but how do we actually do this? For you listening, what does this mean in practical terms? How can we start cultivating these kinds of boundaries?
Right. It's not just theory. Zampella offers 5 key practices, and they're less about rigid rules and more about cultivating awareness and embodying these principles.
Okay, let's hear them.
First, articulate your commitments. This is foundational. Ask yourself honestly, what am I truly committed to at this stage of my life, in this specific relationship, in my work?
Actually name them. Write them down, maybe.
Yes, write them down, make them tangible. The idea is that your boundaries should serve these deep commitments, not just your immediate fears or reactions. This gives you your why.
Okay, know your commitments. What's second? Second, name the conditions for integrity. Once you know your commitments, ask, what conditions do I need to stay whole, to stay aligned with these commitments? This might be things like needing silence, or spaciousness like Elena, or maybe honesty, a certain pace, adequate time. Zampella calls these conditions the soil in which your presence grows.
The soil, not the fence. I like that. So they're necessary nutrients, not barriers.
Exactly. Third, make agreements, not announcements. This speaks to the intersubjective nature we talked about. Boundaries work best when they're shared, or at least understood. So instead of just laying down the law, try inviting collaboration, like Marcus did, or maybe asking, I really want to have this difficult conversation, but for me to stay present, I need us to take it slowly. Would you be willing to slow down the pace with me?
Ah, so it becomes an invitation, a request, not just a demand. That feels very different.
It transforms the dynamic. It makes the boundary a relational bridge, not a wall. Fourth, notice the moment of choice. This is about mindfulness. Boundaries aren't just set once. They live in the present moment, in the choices we make.
Yep.
So, pause. Before reacting, ask yourself, is this choice I'm about to make aligned with my core commitments?
Building that muscle of conscious choice instead of just reacting.
Precisely. It's about developing fidelity to your truth, moment by moment. And finally, fifth, attend to the field space, not just the line, content. Sometimes we get so focused on the specific rule, the line, but Zampella urges us to consider the quality of the space the boundary enables. Ask, what kind of field does my clarity open up here? What possibilities does my present invite into this situation?
Focusing on the generative impact, not just the restriction.
Exactly. What are you creating with this distinction?
Those 5 practices, they offer a really concrete way to start shifting. It feels like moving from a mindset that's fundamentally defensive to one that's about generative presence, about authentic commitment. Zampella calls it a quiet evolution, seeing boundaries less as self-protection and more as these generative acts of authentic commitment and care. It really is about building something valuable, isn't it? Not just blocking things out.
It really is. And that metaphor he uses, it just sticks, doesn't it? Boundaries aren't fences. They are fields of clarity. They're the distinctions we make, the agreements we uphold, all so we can remain faithful to who we are and what we feel called to bring into the world. That's silent architecture of freedom.
Silent architecture. Beautiful.
And the deeper gift here, the real takeaway Zampella offers, isn't separation. It's integrity. It's not about withdrawing from the world, but about consciously creating and inhabiting spaces where truth, commitment, and genuine presence can actually take form. It's an invitation, really, for ourselves and for others to show up in those spaces with more truth, more presence, and ultimately more care.
So, as you've been listening to this deep dive, maybe pause and consider, how might thinking of your own boundaries, not as fences, but as these fields of clarity, how might that change things? How you show up at work, in your relationships, even in your relationship with yourself?
And perhaps take just one commitment that you hold dear. Reflect on it. What conditions for integrity, what kind of soil might allow you to live that commitment more fully, more authentically?
Right.
What fields might open up for you if you start cultivating clarity rather than just building